I landed one day early, airport stale air still clinging to my coat, eager to surprise my husband. But as my key turned in the lock, his voice froze me cold. "Make sure you hit record the second she walks through that door." My hand dropped. I realized I had not come home early to a welcome. I had walked right into a trap designed to destroy me. "My name is Haley Rivera. I am 35 years old, a detail-oriented operations manager at Crown Line Systems, and up until 20 minutes ago, I believed I was the luckiest woman in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had spent the last 5 days in Phoenix attending a leadership conference that was supposed to run through the weekend, when the organizers canceled the final 2 days due to a venue issue. I did not groan or complain like my colleagues. Instead, I felt a spark of excitement. I changed my flight immediately, paid the difference without a second thought, and boarded a plane home a full 24 hours early. I decided not to text my husband, Ethan Cole. We had been married for 6 years, and lately, things had felt a little routine. Safe, but routine. I wanted to bring a little electric shock back into our lives. I imagined the look on his face when I walked through the door just before midnight. I imagined him stumbling out of bed, sleep-ruffled and confused. Before breaking into that wide, easy grin I had fallen in love with, I wanted to be the best kind of surprise. The Uber dropped me off at the bottom of our driveway at 11:45 at night. The neighborhood was silent, that heavy, humid silence typical of the South in late spring. I tipped the driver on the app and dragged my suitcase up the concrete path, lifting the wheels so they would not rumble and give me away. The house was dark except for a faint, warm glow spilling out from the living room windows. I smiled to myself. Ethan was probably asleep on the couch with the television on, waiting for my call to say goodnight. I slid my key into the lock with the precision of a burglar. I turned it slowly, holding my breath, and pushed the door open just enough to slip inside. The air conditioning hit me first, cool and smelling of the lemon furniture polish we used. But as I set my suitcase down on the rug, making absolutely no sound, the smile froze on my face. Ethan was not asleep. He was not watching television. I heard the distinct sound of crystal clinking against crystal. A toast. Then came laughter. It was not the warm, genuine laughter of a husband missing his wife. It was sharp, nervous, and filled with adrenaline. Then I heard Ethan's voice. It was clear, sober, and commanding. "She comes back tomorrow," he said. "Tonight is the final run-through." The words did not make sense. Run-through? Like a play? I stood paralyzed in the foyer, my hand still gripping the handle of my luggage. The hallway was shadowed, but the light from the living room cut a sharp angle across the floor. I should have called out his name. I should have walked in and asked what was going on. But my instincts, honed by years of managing corporate crises, screamed at me to stop. I stepped softly to the side, pressing my back against the cool wood of the laundry room door. From this angle, I had a partial view of the living room without being seen. What I saw made the blood drain from my face. The furniture had been rearranged, the coffee table was pushed aside, and in the center of the room, facing the front door, stood a tripod. Mounted on top of it was a smartphone, clamped horizontally, its dark lens staring at the entrance like a sniper's scope. Ethan was standing in the middle of the room. He was wearing his favorite navy button-down shirt, the one he wore when he wanted to look professional yet approachable. Flanking him were two of his oldest friends, Mark and Davis. They were not drinking beer and watching the game. They were standing in specific positions, like actors on a stage mark. "Okay, let's reset," Ethan said, gesturing to the empty space near the doorway. "When she walks in, she's going to be tired. She's going to drop her bag right there. Mark, you need to be sitting on the armchair. You're the witness, remember? You are not involved until she starts screaming." Mark nodded, his face serious. "Got it. I stay seated. I look uncomfortable. I only stand up when you give the signal." "Right," Ethan continued, pacing slightly. "And Davis, you are on camera duty. As soon as I say the trigger phrase, I just want to help you. Haley, you make sure that phone is recording. I want her reaction in 4K. I want every crazy look, every scream, every tear. My stomach churned. I pressed a hand over my mouth to stifle a gasp. They were rehearsing a fight. They were choreographing a breakdown that had not happened yet. Suddenly, a woman's voice cut through the room. It was crisp, metallic, and coming from the speakerphone on the coffee table. "Don't be soft, Ethan. You sounded too apologetic just then." I did not recognize the voice. It was smooth, authoritative, and terrifyingly calm. Ethan stopped pacing and looked down at the phone. "I am trying to look like the victim here, Madeline. I have to sound like I'm walking on eggshells around her." Madeline. The name landed like a stone in my chest. I did not know a Madeline. I knew his coworkers, his gym buddies, his cousins. I had never heard this name before. Yet he spoke it with a familiarity that suggested she was the architect of this entire scene. "The goal isn't just for you to look like a victim," the woman named Madeline said from the speaker. "The goal is for her to look dangerous. Let her self-destruct. If she throws something, let it hit you. If she screams, let her scream. Do not interrupt her until she looks sufficiently unhinged. Let her expose herself." Ethan nodded, a look of grim determination settling on his features. "Understood. We will get the shot. By this time tomorrow, everyone will see exactly what I have been dealing with." I felt like the floor was tilting beneath me. My legs trembled so violently, I thought my knees would buckle. This was not an affair. An affair would have been a jagged, painful heartbreak, but it would have been human. This was something else. This was a calculated dismantling of my character. They were building a cage, and I was supposed to walk into it and lock the door myself. My eyes darted to the tripod again, that black eye waiting to capture my humiliation. If I walked in there now, the script would flip. They would panic. But they would also know I knew. And right now, my only advantage was that they thought I was 2,000 miles away in Phoenix. I looked at Ethan one last time. He was laughing now, high-fiving Davis, looking so relaxed, so relieved at the prospect of destroying me. The man I had shared a bed with for 6 years was gone. In his place was a stranger plotting my social and emotional execution. I took a slow step backward, then another. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, loud enough that I feared they would hear it over the air conditioning. I reached down and lifted my suitcase again. It felt heavier now, as if it contained the weight of my collapsing life. I did not go out the front door. The risk of the latch clicking was too high. Instead, I moved silently through the kitchen, the linoleum cool under my shoes, and unlocked the sliding glass door to the backyard. I had oiled the track myself 3 months ago, a mundane Sunday chore that now saved my life. The door slid open without a whisper. I stepped out into the humid night air, closing the glass behind me. I walked around the side of the house, sticking to the shadows of the hedges, terrified that a neighbor might see me, terrified that a floorboard might creak inside. I did not stop until I reached the end of the block where the streetlights were dim. I called another Uber, my fingers shaking so hard I tapped the wrong destination twice. When the car arrived 5 minutes later, I slid into the back seat and told the driver to take me to the airport hotel. As the car pulled away, I looked back at my house one last time. The warm light still glowed from the window, a beacon of false comfort. Inside, my husband and his friends were resetting their positions, checking the lighting, and preparing to ruin me. I sat back in the dark leather seat and stared at my hands. I had not come home early. I had not arrived to give a surprise. I had walked to the edge of a cliff, looked down, and seen the trap they had built at the bottom. I did not cry. The shock was too cold for tears. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the stranger's car, and realized that Haley Rivera, the loving wife, had died in that hallway. The woman sitting in this car was someone entirely different, and she was the only one who knew the script had changed. The room keycard clicked with a hollow, plastic sound as I pushed open the door to room 412. I had chosen a chain hotel near the airport, one of those places that exist outside of time, where the carpet is always a generic pattern of beige and maroon, and the air smells faintly of industrial cleaner and stale coffee. It was perfect. It was a void, and right now, I needed a void to think. I did not turn on the main lights. I did not unpack my suitcase. I did not throw myself onto the bed and sob into the pillows as a betrayed wife in a movie might do. My eyes were dry. My hands, which had shaken uncontrollably in the Uber, were now steady. The panic from the hallway had calcified into something harder, colder, and infinitely more useful. I sat at the small, laminate desk in the corner and opened my laptop. The screen flared to life, casting a ghostly blue pallor over my face. I looked like a ghost, and perhaps I was. The Haley Rivera who had boarded that plane in Phoenix with a heart full of romance was dead. The woman sitting in the dark was an investigator. I navigated to our family cloud account. Ethan had suggested we merge our digital storage 2 years ago. "It's for convenience," he had said, "so we can share photos and tax documents without emailing them back and forth." At the time, I thought it was a sweet, practical gesture of marital unity. Now, staring at the login prompt, I saw it for what it was: laziness. He had assumed I was too trusting to look, or perhaps he was just arrogant enough to believe he could hide things in plain sight. I typed in the password. Access granted. The file directory loaded. Tax returns, vacation photos, mortgage docs, everything looked normal. A less observant person might have logged off, but I was an operations manager. My entire career was built on spotting anomalies in data. Finding the one line in a spreadsheet that did not balance, I switched the view to recent activity. There it was, a folder created 3 days ago. It was titled Transition Plan. The name made my skin crawl. It sounded like a corporate restructuring, a layoff strategy. I double-clicked it. Inside, the files were organized with terrifying meticulousness. The first file was a spreadsheet named Priority Notifications. I opened it, and the blue light of the screen seemed to burn into my retinas. It was a list of names, not just a few people. There were 30 or 40 names on this list. I scrolled down, my finger hovering over the trackpad. He had categorized them. Group A, close friends. This included Mark and Davis, obviously. Group B, neighbors. The sweet couple next door. The noisy guy across the street. Group C, family, my cousins, his parents. Then I saw Group D, professional. My breath hitched. There were 2 names from Crown Line Systems on the list. One was Caleb Vance, a colleague I respected and worked with closely. The other was the Vice President of Human Resources. Why would Ethan need to notify my HR department? I closed the spreadsheet and opened the next file, a document titled Draft Announcement Email. I read the words, and I felt a physical blow to my chest, heavier than any physical strike. Dear friends and family, the draft began. It is with a heavy heart that I have to reach out to you. As many of you know, Haley has been struggling lately. The pressure of her job has become overwhelming, and I am afraid it is affecting her mental stability. I have tried to help, but her behavior has become erratic and, frankly, concerning. I am sharing this because I need your support as I try to navigate getting her the help she needs, even if she refuses it. I sat back in the cheap hotel chair. He was not just leaving me. He was painting a portrait of a woman on the verge of a breakdown. He was seeding the narrative. If I got angry, it was proof of my instability. If I cried, it was proof of my fragility. If I fought back, it was proof of my erratic behavior. He was inoculating everyone we knew against the truth. I clicked on the next file. It was a calendar export. He had booked an appointment for next Tuesday at 4 p.m. The entry read, Dr. Aris, Marriage Counseling, Initial Consultation for Haley. I checked the details. The confirmation email for the appointment had been sent to a separate, private email address of Ethan's I did not know existed. But the appointment itself was booked under my name. He was creating a paper trail of trying. He could stand in court, or in front of our friends, and say, "Look, I even booked her a therapist, but she wouldn't go." My phone buzzed on the desk, startling me. It was a notification from a group chat, a chat I was not supposed to be part of, or perhaps one he had forgotten to remove me from on his end. But this alert came through the shared cloud syncing to my laptop's messages app. It was a text from Ethan to Mark and Davis. Dinner is set for tomorrow night at Bellamy House. 7 in the evening. I got the big round table in the back. I will do the talking. I am going to lay it all out in front of everyone so the story is clear. Bellamy House. It was an upscale steakhouse in downtown Charlotte. It was loud, public, and expensive. He wanted a stage. He wanted witnesses. He was going to ambush me at dinner, probably with a sympathetic look on his face, and tell our friends that he was worried about me, forcing me to react in public. I placed my hand on my stomach. The nausea was there, rolling like a wave, but I pushed it down. I closed my eyes and took a long, slow exhale, counting to 10. This was not a crime of passion. This was not a man who had fallen in love with someone else and made a mistake. This was a man who had spent weeks, maybe months, architecting my destruction. He wanted to keep the house, keep his reputation, and discard me like a broken piece of equipment, and he was using a woman named Madeline to help him do it. I looked at the time in the corner of the screen. It was 1 a.m. I did not close the laptop. I did not go to sleep. Instead, I opened a new window. If Ethan wanted to play with data, he had forgotten one crucial thing. I was better at it. I clicked on the folder again. I highlighted the files, the hit list, the fake email draft, the counseling confirmation. I did not delete them. That would alert him. Instead, I copied them. I moved the copies to a secure, external drive I kept in my bag for work. Then I sat there in the dark, the cursor blinking like a heartbeat. He thought I was the variable he could control. He thought I was the hysterical wife who would scream and cry and play her part in his movie. I looked at the reflection of my own eyes in the dark screen. They looked tired, yes, but they also looked dangerous. I was not going to crash his dinner. I was not going to make a scene. I was going to let him set the table. I was going to let him invite the audience. And then, when the lights were brightest, I was going to show them the script he had written. But first, I needed to follow the money. Because men like Ethan, men who plan things this meticulously, never do it just for love or reputation. They do it for the assets. I opened a new tab and typed in the URL for our bank. The night was just beginning. The blue light of the laptop screen felt like an interrogation lamp, but I was both the detective and the witness. The hotel room was silent, save for the hum of the mini-fridge and the occasional roar of a jet engine taking off nearby. I had the transition plan folder open, but I needed to verify the infrastructure behind the plot. Emotional betrayal is messy, but financial trails are binary. They are either there or they are not. I opened a new tab and navigated to our primary bank's website. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I knew Ethan's passwords because he used the same variation of his first car and high school football jersey number for everything. He called it consistency. I called it a security risk. Tonight, it was my master key. I bypassed the checking account summary and went straight to the transaction history for the last 90 days. At first glance, it looked mundane. Grocery runs, gas stations, utility bills, but I was looking for patterns, not purchases. I filtered the search by outgoing transfers. There they were. Starting 6 weeks ago, there was a series of withdrawals. They were not large enough to trigger the automatic fraud alert text message we had set for transactions over $500. They were precise. $490, $495, $480. They appeared every Tuesday and Friday. The recipient was listed as L.S. Consulting. I ran a quick search on the Secretary of State's Business Registry database in another tab. L.S. Consulting was registered only 2 months ago. The registered agent was a lawyer whose office was in a strip mall on the edge of town. These were legal fees, structured carefully to avoid my attention. He was paying a divorce attorney from our joint savings account, siphoning off our money to pay the person he hired to destroy me. But that was just the petty theft. I needed to see the grand larceny. I clicked on the Loans and Mortgages tab. We had a standard mortgage with 15 years left. That was normal. But below it, there was a section that made my breath catch in my throat. Pending applications. There was a file for a home equity line of credit, or HELOC. I clicked to expand the details. The application was for $150,000. It was secured against the equity of our home, the home I had paid the down payment for with my inheritance from my grandmother. The status read, Underwriting Review. I felt a cold sweat prickle the back of my neck. A HELOC requires the consent of both homeowners. There was no way he could have applied for this without me. I downloaded the application PDF. I scrolled past the interest rates and the repayment terms, down to the signature page. There, at the bottom, was my name, Haley Rivera. It was an electronic signature, date stamped 3 weeks ago. I stared at the loop of the H and the sharp cross of the T. It looked exactly like my signature. Ethan had access to my DocuSign history. He had copied my digital signature and pasted it onto a document that would put us 6 figures into debt, money that he would likely withdraw and vanish with, leaving me with the liability. This was not just lying. This was felony bank fraud. I closed the document before I could punch the screen. I needed to be thorough. I needed the full picture of the damage. I navigated to a free credit monitoring site and requested my full report. It took 30 seconds to generate. I scanned the summary. My score was still high, which was a relief. But the open accounts section held a nasty surprise. There was a credit card listed that I did not recognize, a premium travel rewards card with a $20,000 limit. It had been opened 3 months ago. I expanded the details. The balance was already at $12,000. The billing address was not our home. It was a post office box in a part of the city I never visited. I looked at the transaction categories: high-end jewelry stores, a boutique hotel in downtown Charlotte, several charges at Bellamy House, the same restaurant where he was planning to ambush me tomorrow. He was funding his affair, and his plotting, on credit that was tied to my social security number. I leaned back in the stiff hotel chair, rubbing my temples. The picture was becoming high definition. Ethan was not just leaving, he was cashing out. He was stripping the copper wire out of the walls of our marriage before he burned the house down. I tabbed back to the transition plan folder I had copied from the cloud. I had glossed over a file earlier called Talking Points, assuming it was just notes. Now, knowing the financial stakes, I opened it with a different perspective. It was a script, a literal script. The document was divided into columns. The left column was titled, If Haley Says, and the right column was, Ethan Responds. If Haley says, You are stealing money. Ethan responds, I moved funds to a secure account because I was worried about your impulsive spending during your manic episodes. I am just trying to protect our assets. If Haley says, Who is Madeline? Ethan responds, She is a grief counselor I have been speaking to. I did not want to worry you. If Haley says, I am not crazy, Ethan responds, voice low, calm. I know you believe that, honey. But look at how you are shouting. You are scaring me. I read the lines, and my blood ran cold. He had an answer for everything. He was effectively criminalizing my reactions. If I got angry about the theft, he would call it mania. If I questioned the infidelity, he would call it paranoia. He was not just gaslighting me. He was building a legal defense for why he should have sole control over our finances. He was framing me as mentally incompetent. That was the key. If he could prove I was unstable, he could get power of attorney, or at least a favorable judgment in court that gave him control of the assets for my own good. I scrolled to the very bottom of the folder. There was one last PDF I had missed. It was titled Marital Asset Proposal. It looked like a draft legal filing. It outlined a division of assets where Ethan kept the house and the retirement accounts, while I was graciously relieved of the debt he had secretly racked up. But it was the note typed in red at the bottom of the last page that made the room spin. Contingency plan. If Haley escalates confrontation at dinner or refuses to sign the separation agreement, initiate wellness check immediately. Cite danger to self and others based on the knife incident. Fabricate if necessary, to secure a 72-hour psychiatric hold. This will prevent her from accessing accounts during the transfer period. I stopped breathing for a moment. A wellness check. a psychiatric hold. They were prepared to call the police, lie about me having a weapon or being suicidal, and have me locked up in a hospital for 3 days. 3 days was all they needed to drain the HELOC, max out the cards, and disappear, leaving me medicated and discredited in a facility. I looked at the time on the laptop. It was 2 a.m. I was not dealing with a cheating husband. I was dealing with a predator who had been sleeping beside me. I closed the laptop slowly. The darkness of the room felt different now. It was no longer a void. It was a bunker. I reached for my phone. I needed to make a call, but not to Ethan, and not to the police. Not yet. The police would look at a domestic dispute and see 2 sides. I needed someone who looked at documents and saw evidence. I had the proof of fraud. I had the proof of conspiracy. And I had the one thing they did not account for. I was not the unstable, fragile wife they had written into their script. I was the one person who knew exactly how the numbers worked. And tomorrow, I was not going to bring emotions to the table. I was going to bring the audit. The sun was not yet up when I dialed Renee Parker. Renee has been my best friend since college, but more importantly, she is a senior paralegal at a high-stakes litigation firm. She answers her phone at 3 a.m. because her life is governed by deadlines and disasters. "Haley?" Her voice was thick with sleep, but it cleared instantly when I did not say hello. "I just heard them rehearsing a video of me losing control," I said. My voice was steady, frighteningly so. "Ethan, Madeline, they have a script. They have a tripod. They are going to try to commit me." There was a silence on the other end, the kind where you can hear the gears shifting from friend to professional. "Where are you?" "Hotel by the airport. I have my laptop. I have the files." "Do not go back to the house," Renee commanded. "Do not answer his calls. Meet me at the office at 7. I'm bringing Dana." Dana Whitmore was a name you whispered in Charlotte circles with a mix of fear and reverence. She was a divorce attorney who did not just separate couples. She surgically removed the toxicity. When I walked into her glass-walled conference room 4 hours later, clutching a cup of black coffee, Dana was already there, looking impeccable in a cream suit that probably cost more than my first car. I laid it all out: the rehearsed video, the transition plan folder, the fake counseling appointments, the theft. Dana listened without interrupting, her eyes scanning the printouts I had made in the hotel business center. When I finished, I waited for her to be shocked. She wasn't. She took off her glasses and looked at me with laser focus. "He is baiting a trap. Haley," Dana said, her voice low and smooth. "He wants a reaction. He wants you to scream, break a plate, or slap him. In the state of North Carolina, if he can prove you are a danger to yourself or others, he gets the upper hand on everything. Custody of the assets, the narrative, the house. I want to kill him," I said, the anger flaring up for a second. "Good. Keep that inside," Dana countered sharply. "Manipulators hate one thing more than anything else: paper. They thrive on emotion, hearsay." And she said, "They crumble under documentation. You are not going to win this by screaming at dinner tonight. You are going to win this with a timeline." For the next 3 hours, we turned that conference room into a war room. Renee brought in a whiteboard, and we started building the truth dossier. We did not just save files, we forensic proofed them. Every screenshot of the transition plan was time-stamped. We established a chain of custody for the recordings. We downloaded the metadata showing exactly when Ethan created the folder talking points versus when he claimed he started worrying about me. "He says he's been worried about your mental health for months," Renee said, pointing to the screen. "But this folder was created 4 days ago, right after he met with the divorce lawyer." "It proves malice," Dana noted, scribbling on a legal pad. "It proves premeditation, but we need more. You said you work in operations?" "Yes." "Then operate," Dana said. "He's using your digital identity. Prove it wasn't you." I opened my laptop and connected to the secure VPN for Crown Line Systems. My hands were flying now. I was no longer the wife. I was the manager. I pulled up the access logs for my work account. "I was in Phoenix from Monday to Friday," I said. typing in the query command. My laptop was with me. My phone was with me. The results populated on the screen. Tuesday, 10:42 p.m. Successful login from IP address ending in 44. Wednesday, 9:15 p.m. Successful login from IP address ending in 44. That is our home IP address, I said, pointing at the screen. Someone logged into my work email while I was 2,000 miles away. How? Renee asked. Don't you have two-factor authentication? I do, I said, my stomach tightening. But we have backup codes, printed lists of 10-digit codes you can use if you lose your phone. I keep a printout in the back of my desk drawer at home, just in case of emergencies. Ethan knew about that drawer. He used to tease me about being overprepared. Now, he was using my preparation to hang me. He had used those codes to access my work email, likely to forward those fake concerning emails to himself or my HR department. I picked up my phone and called the IT security lead at Crown Line. I did not call Caleb Vance, my friend. I went straight to the Director of Information Security. This is Haley Rivera, I said when he picked up. I need to file a formal security incident report. I have detected unauthorized access to my corporate account from a recognized non-secure location using emergency backup protocols. The director paused. Are you requesting a lockout, Haley? No, I said, looking at Dana. She shook her head slightly. I am requesting a monitoring log. I want official documentation that those logins occurred and that the geolocation does not match my travel authorization. Do not alert the intruder yet. Just log it. Copy that. Consider it flagged. I hung up. By filing that report, I had created a third-party record. If Ethan tried to use anything he found or planted in my work email, I now had proof it wasn't me. I wasn't accusing him yet. I was just closing the blast doors. Dana sat back, looking at a new document Renee had just handed her from a background check service. The room went quiet. The air conditioning hummed, but the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Haley, Dana said, her voice lacking its usual professional detachment. How long have you been planning to start a consulting business? I frowned. I'm not. I love my job at Crown Line. Dana slid a piece of paper across the mahogany table. It was a filing from the Secretary of State's office. Entity name, HR Ventures, LLC. Registered agent, Haley Rivera. Date of formation, 6 months ago. I stared at the paper. I didn't do this. It gets worse, Dana said, sliding a second page over. This LLC has already taken out a small business line of credit for $50,000. The funds were dispersed to a checking account that is technically in your name, but the statements are going to a P.O. box. My hands started to tremble again. Ethan wasn't just stealing our savings. He was creating a shell company in my name, racking up debt, and likely planning to leave me with a bankrupt business I didn't even know I owned. Who paid the filing fee? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Renee tapped her tablet. We traced the transaction ID. The filing fee for the LLC was paid 6 months ago using a credit card ending in 4588. I closed my eyes. That's Ethan's personal card. Bingo, Dana said, standing up. He made a mistake. He got arrogant. He used his own card to frame you because he didn't think you'd ever look. She looked at the clock on the wall. It was now 1 p.m. He wants to ambush you at dinner at 7, Dana said, a cold smile touching her lips. He thinks he is walking in there with a script, but you are walking in there with a paper trail that proves he is a fraud, an identity thief, and a conspirator. I looked at the stack of documents, the bank fraud, the fake medical concern, the IT breach, and now this phantom company. I'm ready, I said. Not yet, Dana corrected. He has witnesses, right? The friends? The people on that notification list? Yes. Then we need to make sure that when he starts talking, they don't see a worried husband, Dana said, closing the file folder with a definitive snap. We need to make sure they see a criminal. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. The fear was gone. In its place was the cold, hard clarity of a woman who had just realized that the love of her life was actually her biggest liability. and I was about to liquidate him. I traded the anonymity of the hotel room for the invisibility of a rental car. I chose a gray sedan, the kind of vehicle that disappears in a parking lot, the kind that no one looks at twice. I parked it in the lot of a coffee shop directly across the street from our subdivision entrance. It was 11 in the morning. The sun was high and bright, casting sharp shadows across the manicured lawns of our neighborhood. It looked like a postcard of suburban bliss. I sat in the driver's seat with my sunglasses on and a lukewarm latte in the cup holder, watching my own house through the windshield. It was a surreal form of torture. At 11:30, the front door opened. Ethan stepped out. He was wearing shorts and a t-shirt, looking relaxed, the picture of a man enjoying a day off before his wife returned. He was carrying a ladder. I watched, my grip tightening on the steering wheel. As he unfolded the ladder near the front porch, he disappeared into the garage for a moment and returned with a large, rolled-up banner. He spent the next 20 minutes hanging it above the front door. When he stepped back to admire his work, I could read the letters clearly from across the street. "Welcome home tomorrow." The exclamation point felt like a physical slap. It was grotesque. He was staging the exterior of the house just as carefully as he had staged the interior. To the neighbors, he was the devoted husband excitedly preparing for my return. To me, he was a hunter digging a pit and covering it with leaves. He waved to Mrs. Gable, our elderly neighbor who was walking her dog. She stopped, pointed at the sign, and clapped her hands. Ethan laughed, that charming, boyish laugh that had once made my knees weak, and patted his chest as if to say, "I can't wait." I felt bile rise in my throat. He was not just lying to me. He was weaponizing our community against me. Every smile he flashed at a neighbor was another witness for his defense, another person who would say, "But he was so happy she was coming home. She must have just snapped." I looked down at the notepad where Renee had scribbled a phone number. We had found it in the metadata of the transition plan folder, hidden in the contact properties of the document author. It was listed simply as M. I picked up my phone. I had already installed an app that masked my number, routing the call through a dummy server so it would show up as unknown caller. My finger hovered over the dial button. I needed to know. I needed to match the voice from the speakerphone to a human being. I pressed call. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, the voicemail picked up. "You have reached Madeline Pierce. I am currently away from my desk or with a client. Please leave a detailed message regarding your inquiry, and I will get back to you as soon as possible." The voice was professional, crisp, and undeniably familiar. It was the same metallic, commanding tone I had heard through the speakerphone last night. "Don't be soft, Ethan." But it was more than just the voice on the speaker. I knew that name, Madeline Pierce. I lowered the phone slowly, the recording still playing in the hollow space of the car. My mind raced back 6 months, the annual Crownline Systems vendor gala. I had been standing by the bar, waiting for a drink, when a woman in a sharp emerald green suit approached me. She was striking, with hair cut in a severe, stylish bob. She had introduced herself as a consultant for one of our external logistics partners. "I have heard so much about you." "Haley," she had said, "Ethan speaks of you often." At the time, I thought it was polite networking chatter. I remembered shaking her hand. Her grip had been firm, her eyes scanning my face with an intensity that felt invasive. I realized now that she hadn't been being polite. She had been scouting me. She had been assessing the target. I opened my laptop, tethering it to my phone's hotspot right there in the car. I needed to confirm it. I searched for Madeline Pierce on a professional networking site. Her profile loaded, senior strategy consultant. Her photo stared back at me, the same sharp bob, the same predatory intelligence in her eyes. I went back to the copied email files from Ethan's account. I searched for her name. I found an email thread from 2 months ago. The subject line was timeline adjustment. "She is always too trusting," Ethan had written. "Haley assumes the best in people. It is her fatal flaw. We do not need a smoking gun. We just need a few witnesses to see her acting erratic. Once the seed is planted, her own confusion will do the rest." I read the line again. She is always too trusting. He was using my best quality, my faith in him, my faith in people, as the mechanism for my destruction. He wasn't just cheating on me with Madeline Pierce. He was co-authoring a tragedy with her. Madeline wasn't just a mistress. She was a project manager. She was the architect. Ethan was just the contractor following her blueprints. A new email notification popped up in the inbox I was mirroring. It was an invitation sent from Ethan's personal account to the priority notifications list. 30 people, including Mark, Davis, and the neighbors. Subject: Welcome home. Dinner for Haley. Location: Bellamy House. Private dining room. B time. Tomorrow. 7 in the evening. I know it is last minute, the body of the email read, but I want to surround Haley with love when she gets back. She has had a really rough week in Phoenix, and I think seeing everyone might help ground her. Please, if you can make it, just be there to support her. It was perfect. If I walked into that dinner and got angry about the affair, I would look like I was attacking a room full of people who were just there to support me. If I accused him of theft, I would look paranoid. He was setting the stage so that any reaction I had would be interpreted as a symptom of mental decline. I switched back to the transition plan folder. I needed to know what they were going to say if I stayed calm. If I didn't give them the breakdown they wanted, what was plan B? I opened the file named Talking Points again and scrolled down to a section I had skimmed over earlier. It was labeled Contingencies. There was a bullet point that made the blood drain from my face. If she denies the financial stress or the mood swings, mention the incident from last year. I frowned. What incident? We had a quiet year. We went to the beach. We renovated the guest room. There were no incidents. I read the next line, written in Madeline's precise, instructional tone. Reference the night of November 14th. The police call that was canceled. Even if she denies it, the suggestion that something happened that we kept quiet will make the guests doubt her memory. My hand flew to my mouth. November 14th. I remembered that night. We had stayed in. We ordered pizza. We watched a movie. Nothing happened. Absolutely nothing. But that was the point. They were not just twisting the truth. They were inventing a past. They were going to gaslight me about an event that never occurred. And because it was a secret that was canceled, there would be no police record to prove or disprove it. It would be his word against mine, and he would have the sorrowful, reluctant tone of a husband protecting his wife's dark secret. The incident. It was the ultimate trap. If I screamed, nothing happened. I would sound defensive. If I looked confused, I would look like I was dissociating. I looked out the window at the house. Ethan was gone, but the banner remained. Welcome home tomorrow. He thought he was writing the story. He thought he was the director. I started the car engine. The vibration hummed through the seat. Okay, Ethan, I said to the empty car. You want to talk about the incident on November 14th? Let's talk about it. I put the car in gear. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I had the name. I had the plan. And now I knew exactly what lie they were going to tell. I drove away from the house, leaving the banner flapping in the wind. I had one more stop to make before the curtain went up. If they wanted to invent a police record, I was going to bring them a real one. I sat in the rental car, the engine idling, staring at the contact name Hubby on my phone screen. It was time to feed the beast. If Ethan thought I was suspicious, he would cancel the dinner. He would scrub the hard drives. He would go to ground. I needed him arrogant. I needed him to believe that his script was running perfectly. I typed a single message. Flight delayed in Phoenix. Mechanical issue. Won't get in until late tomorrow night. Sorry to ruin the surprise. I hit send. The response came 30 seconds later. Oh no. I am so sorry. Honey, don't worry about us. Just get home safe. I will miss you tonight. I read the text with a dry, humorless laugh. He was not sorry. He was thrilled. I had just given him another 24 hours to perfect his trap. He thought he was buying time. In reality, he was buying me the opportunity to load my weapon. I drove back to Dana Whitmore's office. The conference room had become our command center. Dana was on the phone with a judge's clerk, her voice low and urgent. We are filing an emergency ex parte motion regarding the dissipation of marital assets, Dana said, catching my eye and nodding. We need an immediate freeze on the HELOC application and a hold on the joint brokerage accounts. Yes, we have evidence of fraudulent signatures. I am sending the affidavit now. While Dana built the legal firewall, I went to work on the practical one. I logged into my company's payroll portal. For 6 years, my salary had been deposited directly into our joint checking account. It was the account that paid the mortgage, the bills, and apparently, the retainer for Ethan's divorce lawyer. I deleted the routing number. I entered the details for a new account I had opened online 10 minutes ago. An account at a different bank, one Ethan did not know existed. Then, I contacted the 3 major credit bureaus. With a few clicks, I froze my credit. If Ethan tried to open another credit card in my name today to fund his celebratory dinner, he would be declined. Renee sat across from me, assembling what we called the truth dossier. She was not just stapling papers together, she was curating a museum of lies. I am keeping this visual, Renee said, sliding a sleek black binder toward me. People at a dinner party do not want to read legal briefs. They want pictures. I opened the binder. It was devastatingly simple. Page 1. A screenshot of the file metadata showing the transition plan folder was created days ago. Page 2. The talking points script side by side with the email he sent to our friends. Page 3. The bank statement showing the transfers to his lawyer. Page 4. A copy of the HELOC application with the forged signature highlighted in neon yellow. It is not a defense, Renee said firmly. It is an indictment. You do not explain yourself. Haley, you just slide this across the table. I nodded, closing the binder. I need to make a call to the restaurant. I dialed Bellamy House. I knew the general manager, a man named Marcus, because Crown Line Systems hosted our holiday parties there. Marcus, it is Haley Rivera, I said. Mrs. Rivera, we are all set for the big welcome home dinner tomorrow. Ethan requested the center round table. Actually, Marcus, there has been a slight change in plans, I lied smoothly. I am landing earlier than Ethan expects. I want to turn the tables and surprise him. Keep the reservation for the main table. But can you unlock the private sliding doors to the library room right next to it? I want to have a space to debrief with the family privately if the noise in the main room gets too loud. Of course, Marcus said. I love a good surprise. I will have the private room prepped and unlocking the connecting doors. I did not want a private room to hide. I wanted a private room to corner them. I wanted to make sure that when the truth came out, they could not run out the front door into a crowd of strangers. I wanted to lock them in with the consequences. Next, I sent 3 text messages. The first was to my mother, Linda Rivera, in Denver. I need you in Charlotte tomorrow. Emergency. Ethan is trying to have me committed to take the house. I have proof. Do not call him. Just fly. My mother is a retired school principal. She does not panic. She acts. Her reply came in 1 minute. Flight booked. Landing at 4. Pick me up. The second was to Caleb Vance. Dinner tomorrow at Bellamy House, 7 o'clock. Ethan invited you to witness my breakdown. I need you to witness his fraud. Trust me. Caleb replied with a simple thumbs up. The third was to the IT security director I had spoken to earlier. I am inviting you to dinner tomorrow as a personal friend. You will want to be there. Bring the logs. The stage was set. Now I needed the costume. I went to a boutique near the office. I walked past the racks of floral dresses and soft, feminine blouses. I was not going to be the soft, feminine victim. I pulled a charcoal gray jumpsuit off the rack. It was tailored, sharp, and covered me from neck to wrists. It looked like armor. I paired it with flat shoes. I was not going to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me stumble in heels. I wanted to look like I was coming from a board meeting, not a mental breakdown. I wanted to look like the person who signed the checks. I returned to the hotel room as the sun began to set. I felt a strange, cold calm. The fear from the night before had evaporated, replaced by the mechanical precision of execution. I was reviewing the timeline one last time when my phone pinged with a high-priority email notification. It was from the IT department at Crown Line. Subject: Security Incident. Data exfiltration alert. I opened it, my heart rate spiking slightly. Haley, following your request, we did a deep dive into the unauthorized login sessions from your home IP address. We found a forwarding rule that was created on Tuesday night. I read the details. Someone, Ethan, using my backup codes, had set up a rule to auto-forward any emails containing the keywords financial, strategy, or personnel to an external Gmail address. The address was mpierce, consulting88, Gmail. Come, M. Pierce, Madeline. I sat back, the breath hissing out of my teeth. This was not just about the affair anymore. Madeline Pierce was a consultant for a vendor we worked with. By forwarding my internal work emails to her personal account, Ethan had not just invaded my privacy, he had facilitated corporate espionage. He had handed confidential Crown Line data to a third-party contractor. He had just crossed the line from a messy divorce to a federal crime. I picked up the black binder Renee had made. I turned to the back and slid the printed email notification into the plastic sleeve of the final page. They thought they were telling a story about a crazy wife. They did not realize that by the time dessert was served, they would be the ones pleading for a plea deal. I turned off the lights in the hotel room. I did not need to rehearse. I knew my lines, and unlike them, I did not have to memorize a lie. The private dining room at Bellamy House smelled of aged beef, expensive red wine, and betrayal. It was 7:15 in the evening. I stood outside the heavy oak sliding doors for a moment, listening. The sound insulation was good, but not perfect. I could hear the low rumble of male laughter and the clinking of heavy silverware against china. Ethan was in there. I could picture him perfectly. He would be standing at the head of the table, a scotch in hand, looking weary but brave. He would be telling them how hard he had tried to save me, how much he loved me despite my episodes. He was building the pyre before he tied me to the stake. I smoothed the front of my charcoal jumpsuit. I did not check my makeup in a mirror. I did not need to look pretty. I needed to look present. I signaled the waiter to open the door. The heavy wood slid back on its tracks. The noise from inside spilled out, a wave of chatter that died instantly, rippling from the door to the far end of the table like a fuse being extinguished. Ethan was mid-sentence. He was leaning over the shoulder of Mark, his hand resting paternally on his friend's back. He froze. For a fraction of a second, the mask slipped. I saw the flash of pure, unadulterated panic in his eyes. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. But Ethan is a performer. He recovered in less than a second. He set his glass down and opened his arms wide, his face transforming into a mask of relieved delight. "Haley!" he exclaimed, his voice booming a little too loudly. "Oh my God, you made it. I thought the flight was delayed." He moved toward me, clearly intending to embrace me, to physically pull me into his narrative before I could speak. I did not step back. I simply held up a hand, palm out. It was a small gesture, but it stopped him in his tracks 3 feet away from me. "I caught an earlier connection," I said. My voice was not loud, but in the sudden silence of the room, it carried to every corner. I didn't want to miss the party. I scanned the room. There were 30 people seated around the long, oval table. My mother was there, sitting next to Caleb Vance. They both gave me barely perceptible nods, but the others, Mark, Davis, the neighbors, Madeline Pierce, looked like deer caught in headlights. They had been prepped for a tragedy, and instead, the protagonist had just walked in looking calm, sharp, and entirely sane. Ethan chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, this is amazing. Have a seat, honey. We were just talking about how much we all support you." He glanced at Davis. It was a subtle look, a quick flick of the eyes. But I saw it. It was the signal. Davis, sitting 3 seats down, fumbled with his phone. He propped it up against a wine glass, the lens pointing directly at me. The red recording light blinked on. Ethan cleared his throat. He adopted a tone of sorrowful concern, his voice dropping an octave. "Haley, look, since you are here, Maybe we should just get everything out in the open. I know you have been under a lot of stress. I know you have been confused. I just want to say, in front of everyone who loves you, that we are here to help. You don't have to hide your struggles anymore." He was doing it. He was starting the script. He expected me to shout, to ask why he was filming, to demand he stop embarrassing me. Instead, I looked directly at the lens of Davis's phone. I locked eyes with the camera. "Keep it rolling, Davis," I said. My tone was conversational, almost bored. "Ensure the microphone is not covered. I want a record of this conversation too." Davis blinked, confused. He looked at Ethan. This was not in the script. The crazy wife was not supposed to ask for the tape. Ethan stiffened. He realized he was losing the emotional rhythm of the room. He needed to escalate. He needed to provoke me. "See?" Ethan said, turning to the group with a sad smile. "She gets like this, defensive, paranoid. Haley, honey, nobody is attacking you. We are just worried. Remember last year? Remember the incident on November 14th? The room went deadly quiet. A fork clattered against a plate. "The incident?" I asked. "Yes," Ethan said, pressing his advantage. He walked around the table, pacing like a lawyer in a courtroom. "The night the police almost came. The night you lost track of reality. We kept it quiet to protect your reputation. Haley, but we can't ignore it anymore. You are exhibiting the same signs." I watched him lie. It was breathtaking. There was no incident on November 14th. We had ordered pepperoni pizza and watched a documentary, but he knew that. He was betting that my denial would look like memory loss. He was betting that the vague, dark suggestion of a police call would plant a seed of doubt in everyone's mind. I did not scream, "Liar." I did not stand up and throw water in his face. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin manila envelope. "November 14th, I repeated thoughtfully. "That is interesting. Ethan." I walked over to the table. I did not go to my seat. I walked to the empty space right in front of him. I placed the envelope on the white tablecloth. It made a dry, sliding sound that seemed louder than a gunshot in the silent room. "Is the police report for that incident in your script?" I asked. Ethan stopped pacing. "What?" "The script," I said, pointing to the envelope. "The file you created 4 days ago titled Talking Points, the one where you instruct yourself to, and I quote, mention the incident from last year if she denies everything." Ethan's face went pale, not white, but a sickly grayish ash color. "I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his smile faltering into a grimace. "You are imagining things again. This is exactly what Dr. Aris said would happen." "Dr. Aris," I said, nodding. "The marriage counselor you booked an appointment with using a fake email address so I would never receive the confirmation? The one you planned to tell everyone I refused to see?" I reached into the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was the printout of the priority notifications spreadsheet. I laid it next to the envelope. "And this," I said, looking around the table, meeting the eyes of the neighbors. "This is the guest list. Group A, Group B, Group C. You are all on here. He didn't invite you to dinner. He cast you as extras." Madeline Pierce, sitting near the end of the table, suddenly pushed her chair back. The screech of wood against the floor was agonizing. She looked ready to bolt. "Sit down, Madeline," Caleb Vance said. His voice was calm, but there was a steel edge to it that I had never heard in the office. "We haven't even ordered appetizers yet." Ethan looked at the papers. He looked at me. His eyes were darting around the room, looking for an exit, looking for an ally. He turned to Davis. "Davis, turn that off," Ethan snapped, his benevolent husband act cracking down the middle. "She is having a delusional episode. She printed out fake papers. Stop filming." But Davis didn't stop. He was staring at the sheet of paper on the table, where his own name was listed under Group A, Witnesses to Provoke. Davis looked up at Ethan. His hand holding the phone was shaking now. "Ethan," Davis said, his voice wobbling, "you sent me this list. You sent me the email last week. You told me exactly where to sit. Shut up, Davis, Ethan hissed. No, wait, Davis continued, the realization dawning on him in real time. He looked at me, then back at Ethan. You told us she was dangerous. You gave us a plan. You said we had to follow the plan to save her. Davis lowered the phone, but he didn't turn it off. He set it on the table, the lens still facing Ethan. We are just doing what you told us to do in the plan. Ethan, Davis blurted out, why are you acting like you didn't write it? The silence that followed was total. It was absolute. It was the sound of a carefully constructed reality shattering into a million pieces. Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at the neighbors. They were not looking at him with sympathy anymore. They were looking at the envelope. They were looking at the man who had invited them to dinner to watch his wife bleed, only to find out he was the one holding the knife. I picked up the wine glass at my place setting. It was full of an expensive Cabernet. I held it up to the light, swirling it gently. I think, I said, breaking the silence, that we should skip the toast, but I do have a few more documents to show you before we order. The silence in the private dining room was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and vibrating with tension. Ethan looked at the documents on the table, then at Davis, and finally at me. The benevolent, worried husband mask did not just slip, it shattered. His posture changed instantly. His shoulders hunched, his jaw jutted out, and the faux sympathy in his eyes hardened into a glare of pure, unadulterated malice. He realized the poor Haley narrative was dead, so he switched to the bitchy Haley narrative. You are enjoying this, aren't you? Ethan sneered, his voice rising loud enough to make the crystal glasses tremble. You didn't come here to talk. You came here to humiliate me. This is exactly what I mean about you being unstable. Who prints out spreadsheets for a family dinner? Who stalks their husband's computer? This is sick. Haley, you are making a scene and embarrassing everyone here. He gestured wildly at the table, trying to rally the troops. He wanted them to see my preparation as obsession, my evidence as madness. I did not blink. I did not raise my voice. I kept my tone as flat and even as a heart monitor on a corpse. If I am so unstable, Ethan, I asked, looking him dead in the eye, why did you have to rehearse? Ethan opened his mouth, but I cut him off. I saw you. I saw the tripod. I saw the script. If I was truly the crazy woman you say I am, you would not need a camera crew and a director. You would just need to open the door. People do not rehearse the truth. They only rehearse lies. I was preparing for the worst, Ethan shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I was trying to protect myself. From what? The voice did not belong to me. My mother, Linda Rivera, stood up. She is a woman of small stature, barely 5'2", but at that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. She was holding the printout of the priority notifications email in a hand that did not shake. You listed me as Group C, my mother said. Her voice was quiet, trembling with a mixture of hurt and fury. I am not a focus group. Ethan, I am her mother. You sent me an email saying you were afraid for her life, and all the while you were categorizing me like a data point in a marketing campaign. Ethan turned to her, his face flushing red. Linda, you don't understand. I was just trying to be organized. Haley is twisting this. Do not speak to me, my mother snapped, dropping the paper onto her plate. I looked at you like a son, and you looked at me like a witness. Ethan looked around the table, desperate for an ally. He looked at the neighbors. Mrs. Gable was staring at him with her mouth slightly open, her hand clutching her pearls. Mark was looking down at his shoes. The wall of support he had built was crumbling brick by brick. This is ridiculous, Ethan spat, trying to regain control by sheer volume. So I made a list. So what? That is not a crime. You are trying to ruin my reputation because you are paranoid. You are hacking my accounts, invading my privacy. Actually, it is the other way around. Caleb Vance spoke up from across the table. He did not stand up. He leaned back in his chair, looking every bit the IT security professional he was. The IT logs are clear, Ethan, Caleb said, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. Haley's corporate account was accessed from your home IP address on Tuesday night. Backup codes were used. That is a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. And since you set up an auto-forwarding rule to send proprietary company data to an external email address, you are also looking at corporate espionage. Ethan froze. The color drained from his face completely. He knew about the affair. He knew about the lies, but he did not know we had tracked the data. I didn't, Ethan stammered. I didn't send any data. The logs don't lie, man, Caleb said, taking a sip of his water. And neither does the forwarding address, M. Pierce Consulting. Ethan's head snapped toward the end of the table. Madeline Pierce had been trying to make herself invisible. She had pushed her chair back and was inching toward the sliding doors, clutching her purse like a shield. She looked nothing like the confident predator from the phone call. She looked like a rat caught in a floodlight. It was her, Ethan said. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath. Ethan pointed a shaking finger at Madeline. She told me to do it. She said she needed the data for a project. She manipulated me. I didn't want to do any of this. She told me Haley was going to leave me. She told me I had to protect the assets. This is all her. It was pathetic. It was the final, desperate act of a coward throwing his accomplice into the fire to save his own skin. Madeline stopped moving. She stood near the door, her back to the wall. Her face went from fearful to furious in a heartbeat. She was not going to go down for a man who couldn't even stick to the script. "Excuse me?" Madeline said, her voice sharp and shrill. "You came to me, Ethan. You begged me to help you hide the money." "You liar!" Ethan screamed, stepping toward her. "You wrote the script. You told me what to say. And you were happy to say it," Madeline shouted back, stepping into the center of the room, abandoning all pretense of being a bystander. "You told me she was crazy. You told me she was abusive. You said I was saving you." She looked at me, her eyes wide and frantic, pleading for a different kind of understanding. "He told me you weren't coming back until tomorrow night," Madeline blurted out. "He said the house was clear. He said we had 24 hours to stage the scene before you walked in." The confession hung in the air. He said we had 24 hours to stage the scene. Ethan closed his eyes. He knew it was over. He had tried to frame me for being unstable, but in the span of 5 minutes, he had been exposed as a thief, a liar, and a conspirator by his own mother-in-law, his wife's colleague, and his own mistress. The witnesses at the table, the friends and neighbors, were silent. They were not looking at me with pity anymore. They were looking at me with awe, and they were looking at Ethan with disgust. The sliding door to the main restaurant opened. It was not a waiter. Dana Whitmore stepped into the room. She was wearing a sharp navy suit, holding a leather portfolio. She did not look at the guests. She did not look at the food. She walked straight to the head of the table where Ethan was standing, looking like a man whose parachute had failed to open. The room was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning vents humming. Dana placed a thick stack of stapled documents onto the table, right next to the empty wine glass Ethan had been holding earlier. "Ethan Cole," Dana said. Her voice was professional, devoid of emotion. The voice of the law itself. "I am representing your wife. These are divorce papers, filed this afternoon. Along with them is a temporary restraining order regarding the dissipation of marital assets and a cease and desist regarding the harassment of my client." Ethan looked down at the papers. Superior Court of North Carolina was printed in bold black letters at the top. "You can't do this here," Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. "This is a dinner party." "This is not a dinner party," I said, speaking for the last time. I stood up and smoothed my jumpsuit. "This is a closing argument." Dana turned to Ethan. "You are instructed not to return to the marital residence tonight. A hotel has been arranged for you, paid for from your separate funds. Any attempt to contact Haley directly will be a violation of the order. You will speak only to me." Ethan looked at me. His eyes were wet, but it wasn't sadness. It was the shock of a man who had brought a knife to a gunfight and realized too late that his opponent was driving a tank. "Haley," he said, reaching a hand out, a reflex of his manipulation. "Honey, please." I looked at his hand, the hand that had signed the fake loan application, the hand that had hung the banner, "Welcome home tomorrow." "Don't," I said. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a single tear. I just looked at him, and then I looked at the door. He understood. I hadn't come here to save the marriage. I hadn't come here to argue. I had come here to make sure that when the story was told, everyone knew exactly who the villain was. I turned to my mother. "Ready to go. Mom, I think we're done here." The private dining room had transformed. It was no longer a space for a celebration, nor was it a dinner party. It felt like a tribunal. The air was thin, charged with the static of judgment. Ethan looked at the divorce papers Dana had placed on the table, and then he looked up at me. His eyes were not pleading anymore. They were narrowing, searching for a loophole, a technicality, anything to pull him back from the edge of the cliff. He found one, or at least, he thought he did. "This is inadmissible," Ethan spat, pointing a shaking finger at the manila envelope containing the printouts. He turned to the group, his voice pitching higher, trying to rally the audience that had already abandoned him. "She broke into my personal accounts. She hacked my private correspondence. You all see that, right? She is a stalker. This is a violation of privacy. Nothing here is valid because she stole it." He looked at Mark, then at the neighbors, desperate for a nod of agreement. "She is the criminal here. She invaded my privacy to manufacture this insanity." Dana Whitmore did not even blink. She adjusted her glasses, her movement slow and deliberate, highlighting Ethan's frantic energy by contrast. "Mr. Cole?" Dana said, her voice dry and crisp, like paper being torn. The folder titled Transition Plan was located on a cloud drive labeled Family Shared. You granted my client full administrative access to that drive 2 years ago. The edit history is visible to any authorized user. There is no expectation of privacy in a folder you explicitly shared with your wife. The history of your edits is not a secret. It is a timeline. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but the legal reality clamped his jaw shut. He had been so arrogant, so sure I would never look, that he had left the blueprints of his plot on the kitchen table. "Furthermore," I added, my voice cutting through his stammering, "let's talk about things that were actually signed without permission." I picked up the document regarding the home equity line of credit. I held it up so the room could see the signature line. "You applied for a line of credit against our home for $150,000, I said. "You did this 3 weeks ago. There is a signature here that looks like mine. It is a digital copy of my signature from our tax returns." "I was managing our portfolio," Ethan shouted, his face turning a blotchy red. "I was moving assets to protect us. I was going to tell you once the funds were secured." "You were protecting nothing but your own exit strategy," I replied, lowering the paper. "And you opened a credit card in my name, sent to a post office box, which you used to pay for the lawyer you hired to destroy me. I do not need to call you a thief, Ethan. The fraud department at the bank has a very specific set of codes for what you did. They will call it by its right name." The word fraud hung in the air. The neighbors shifted in their seats. This was not a domestic dispute anymore. This was a felony. At the far end of the table, Madeline Pierce made her move. She had been watching the exchange with growing horror. Realizing that her role as the sophisticated consultant was dissolving into that of a co-conspirator, she grabbed her clutch purse and stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I am leaving," Madeline announced, her voice tight. "This is a personal matter between a husband and wife. I have no place here. I was dragged into this." She turned toward the sliding doors, her heels clicking rapidly on the hardwood. "Ms. Pierce, please sit down." The voice came from the man sitting next to Caleb Vance. It was the director of information security for my company. He had not spoken a word until this moment. He did not raise his voice, but the authority in it was absolute. Madeline froze. her hand on the brass handle of the door. "Excuse me? You can't keep me here." "I am not keeping you here," the director said, tapping a finger on a tablet he had placed on the table. "But I strongly suggest you stay. We have logged multiple instances of proprietary company data being forwarded from Mrs. Rivera's internal account to a private email address registered to your consulting firm. That is a breach of our non-disclosure agreement and a violation of federal trade secret laws." Madeline turned pale. She looked at Ethan, then back at the director. "I didn't use the data," she stammered. "Ethan sent it. I didn't ask for it. Receiving stolen property is also a crime." "Madeline," the director said calmly, "especially when you are a contracted vendor. If you walk out that door now, the next conversation you have will not be with us. It will be with the legal department of Crown Line Systems and the authorities. I suggest you sit down and listen to what Mrs. Rivera's lawyer has to say." Madeline looked at the door. Then she looked at the grim faces around the table. Slowly, defeatedly, she walked back to her chair and sat down. She did not look at Ethan. Ethan was vibrating now. The walls were closing in from every side. The financial exit was blocked. The mistress was compromised. The narrative was flipped. He looked at me, and the handsome, charming mask fell away completely. What was left underneath was ugly, raw, and terrifying. "You think you are so smart," Ethan hissed, his voice dropping to a growl. "You think this makes you a winner? You are ruining everything I built. You are humiliating me in front of my friends." "I am not doing anything, Ethan," I said, standing perfectly still. "I am just turning on the lights. You are the one who arranged the furniture." Davis, who had been holding his phone earlier to film my breakdown, slowly lifted the device again, but this time, the lens was not pointed at me. It was pointed directly at Ethan. Ethan saw the red light on the phone. He lunged toward Davis. "Put that away!" Ethan screamed, his voice cracking. "Stop filming me! I am the victim here. She is the one who is crazy. Look at her. She is cold as ice. Who acts like this? Who sits there with a lawyer and destroys her husband?" "A woman who is done being a victim," I said. "Stop it!" Ethan yelled, slamming his fist onto the table so hard that the silverware jumped. "You don't get to do this. I planned this. I wrote the script. You were supposed to be the one crying. You were supposed to be the one leaving in an ambulance." The room was deadly silent. Ethan was panting, his chest heaving, his face twisted into a snarl of pure entitlement. He had just admitted it. He had admitted he wanted me in an ambulance. "Davis," I said softly, without looking away from Ethan. "Are you getting this?" "Yeah," Davis whispered, his face pale. "I got it. Every second." "I don't need the video," I said to the room. "I don't need a file. I just need you all to see him. Look at him. This is the man who told you he was worried about my mental health. Does he look worried? Or does he look like he got caught?" Dana stepped forward again. She placed a final sheet of paper on the table. "Mr. Cole, as of 10 minutes ago, we have served notice to your bank and the mortgage lender regarding the fraudulent applications." Dana said, "All joint assets are frozen pending a forensic accounting audit. The credit cards are locked. The HELOC is suspended. You cannot access a single cent without my client's written authorization. If you attempt to transfer funds, you will be in contempt of court." Ethan stared at her. The realization hit him like a physical blow. He had no money. He had no house. He had no mistress. And he had no reputation. He looked at me with a hatred so pure it felt like heat radiating across the table. He wanted to hurt me. He wanted to say the one thing that would break my composure, the one thing that would make me scream so he could point and say, "See? She is crazy." He leaned over the table, his teeth bared. "You bitch," Ethan whispered, the words dripping with venom. "If you had just kept your mouth shut, if you had just played your part, I would have given you a decent ending. I would have let you keep your dignity." The entire table gasped. It was the confession. It was the undeniable proof. I would have given you a decent ending. He admitted that the end of our marriage was a production he was directing, and I was just a prop he intended to discard. I looked at him, and for the first time in 24 hours, I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a chess player who just watched their opponent knock over his own king. "Thank you, Ethan," I said. "I think everyone heard that." I picked up my purse. I did not need to say anything else. He had just convicted himself. The room was quiet, but it was not peaceful. It was the heavy, suffocating silence of a verdict being read. Ethan stood at the head of the table, his chest heaving, his face slick with sweat. He looked like a man who had woken up in a burning house only to realize he was the one holding the matches. Dana Whitmore did not give him time to recover from his outburst. She reached into her leather portfolio and pulled out a final, thick document. She did not slide it across the table this time. She walked around the edge of the table, her heels clicking rhythmically on the hardwood floor, and placed it directly in front of him. "This is an acknowledgement of service," Dana said, her voice devoid of any warmth. "You do not need to agree to it. You just need to receive it. Inside, you will find the petition for divorce, the temporary restraining order, and the emergency motion for exclusive use of the marital residence. You have 2 hours to pack a bag. After that, if you return to the property, the police will be called to enforce the order." Ethan stared at the papers. "You can't kick me out of my own house. The house is currently the subject of a fraud investigation due to the unauthorized loan application," Dana corrected him legally. "Until that is resolved, the court has granted Haley sole occupancy to secure the asset. Sign the receipt, Ethan, or don't. The process server is waiting in the lobby to hand you a duplicate copy the moment you step outside." Ethan looked around the room. He looked at Mark. He looked at Davis. He looked at the neighbors. He was looking for a lifeline, for someone to say, "Wait, isn't this too harsh?" But nobody moved. They had heard him scream that he wanted to put me in an ambulance. They had seen the mask fall. "You set me up," Ethan whispered, his voice shaking. "You made me look like a monster." I reached for my phone. It was the only prop I needed for the finale. "I didn't make you anything, Ethan," I said. "I just hit play." I tapped the screen. The volume was turned all the way up. From the small speaker, a voice filled the room. It was not my voice. It was his. It was the recording I had made the night before, crouching behind the laundry room door, terrified and alone. "Make sure you hit record the second she walks through that door." The clip was short, 5 or 7 seconds. But it was enough. I played it again. "Make sure you hit record the second she walks through that door." I set the phone down on the table. "That was you," I said calmly. "Last night, when you thought I was in Phoenix, you weren't worried about me. You were directing a scene. You wanted a recording of me breaking down so you could show it to a judge. Well, now you have a recording, but it is of you." Ethan opened his mouth to speak, to spin another web, but the sound of his own voice plotting my destruction had sucked the air out of his lungs. He looked at Mrs. Gable, our neighbor. She turned her head away, refusing to meet his eyes. He looked at Davis. Davis was staring at the phone, looking sick. Ethan stammered. "I was trying to get evidence of how hard it is." His phone rang. It was not his cell phone. It was mine. I had set the volume to loud, and I answered it on speakerphone immediately. "This is Haley," I said. A professional, clear voice echoed through the silent dining room. "Ms. Rivera, this is Agent Miller from the Fraud Department at First National Bank. We are following up on your report regarding the HELOC application. We have reviewed the digital signature logs and the IP addresses you provided. We have confirmed that the application originated from a device not associated with your two-factor authentication profile. We are opening a formal investigation into identity theft and bank fraud. Is your husband, Ethan Cole, available to speak? We need to verify his involvement before we forward the file to the federal authorities." Ethan's face went from red to a terrifying shade of white. He choked out. "He is here," I said into the phone. "But he is currently being served with legal papers. I would advise you to contact him through his attorney." "Understood," the agent said. We will be freezing all associated accounts immediately. Thank you. Ms. Rivera. The call ended. The silence that followed was absolute. This was not a marital dispute anymore. This was not a story about a sad breakup. This was federal territory. Ethan looked at the table, his hands gripping the edge of the wood as if the floor were opening up beneath him. At the other end of the table, Madeline Pierce stood up again. She looked terrified. "I am leaving," she said, her voice high and brittle. "I don't know anything about bank loans. This has nothing to do with me." "Sit down, Madeline," the IT director said. He did not shout. He simply held out his hand. "I need your laptop. And your phone." "You can't take my property," Madeline shrieked. "It contains proprietary data belonging to Crown Line Systems," the director said, standing up and blocking her path to the door. "You are in possession of stolen trade secrets. We can do this the easy way, where you hand over the devices for a forensic scrub and we discuss a non-prosecution agreement. Or we can do this the hard way, where I call the police and report corporate espionage. You are not a witness. Ms. Pierce, you are an accomplice. Choose." Madeline looked at Ethan. For a moment, I thought she might ask him for help, but then she looked at the wreckage of his life. The divorce papers, the fraud investigation, the alienated friends, and she made her choice. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone and her slim laptop, and shoved them into the director's hands. "He sent them to me," Madeline said, pointing a shaking finger at Ethan. "I didn't ask for them. He was trying to impress me. He wanted me to think he was a big shot at the company." She looked at me, her eyes wet with angry tears. "He told me you were pathetic. He's the pathetic one." She stormed out the door, the sound of her exit the only noise in the room. She was not a winner. She was just another rat fleeing the sinking ship. I stood up. I smoothed the fabric of my jumpsuit. I felt light. The heavy, crushing weight that had been sitting on my chest since I walked into my house 24 hours ago was gone. I picked up the small velvet box I'd kept in my pocket. I opened it. Inside was my wedding ring. I took it out. Ethan watched me. He looked broken. He looked small. He looked like a man who was just beginning to understand that the next 10 years of his life were going to be spent in courtrooms and lawyers' offices. "You won," he whispered. "Are you happy? You destroyed me." I looked at him, really looked at him. For the last time, I didn't see the man I loved. I didn't see the monster I feared. I just saw a sad, greedy man who had underestimated his wife. I placed the ring on the table. I did not throw it. I did not make a scene. I placed it gently next to the stack of legal papers. The gold made a soft clink against the wood. "You wanted a villain, Ethan," I said softly. "You wrote a whole script where I was the bad guy. You wanted me to be the crazy, unstable wife so you could be the hero." I paused, looking around the table at the faces of the people who had come to watch my downfall. "I refused the role," I said. I turned my back on him. I nodded to my mother, who stood up and took my arm. I nodded to Dana, who was already packing up her files. Her job done. I walked toward the sliding doors. I did not look back. I could hear Ethan breathing, ragged and uneven. But I did not care. I stepped out of the restaurant and into the cool night air of Charlotte. The streetlights were humming, the traffic was moving, the world was continuing, indifferent to the drama inside. I took a deep breath. The air tasted cold and clean. It tasted like the truth. I walked to the car, my mother beside me. For the first time in years, I did not wonder what Ethan was thinking. I did not wonder what lie he was telling. I did not wonder if I was good enough, or sane enough, or worthy enough. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine. I was Haley Rivera. And finally, this story belonged to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on how Haley handled this situation. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Olivia Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.